She blindfolded him with her silky purple scarf, handed him a glass of wine, then gently brushed his right cheek as if feeling its texture. She asked him to take a sip and guess whether the wine was red or white. When he failed, she placed a soft kiss on his lips and promised to make him a refined French wine connoisseur, just like her. He took her to the nearest bar from his house. They sat together in a dimly lit corner where the waiter placed 2 large bottles of beer on the table. Holding her left hand, he pressed a light kiss on the knuckle of her finger, then took her scarf and blindfolded her in turn. Placing one of the bottles in her hand, he challenged her to distinguish, with just one sip, whether the beer was dark or blonde. When she also failed, he smiled and vowed to turn her into a true German beer lover, just like him. She gazed at him with enamored eyes and whispered, as if sharing a secret, "There are 2 forces in life, my love, against which resistance is futile, nature and love. And love, by its very nature, allows no distance to remain uncrossed." Meanwhile, Abderrahman, watching this unfold on the small screen, took a sip of the cold tea he had forgotten at the start of the film. He closed his eyes, eager to replay the scene in his mind and savor it for as long as possible. He was a master of daydreaming, having trained his imagination since his barren university days to summon all that was allowed and forbidden, indulging in both as much and as often as he pleased. If he had always felt like a wild mint plant trapped in a glass container, growing only as much as the vessel allowed, then dreaming granted him the vastness of the entire world. That is why, among the few things he believed in, he was certain that dreaming was an act of resistance. His restless mind leapt between past and present, between the dead and the living, between a life of oppression and a life of freedom, until a voice within him rang clear and sharp, like the shattering of a crystal perfume bottle. There must be a mermaid somewhere in the world, and an ogress lurking in another. There must be, otherwise what's left to enchant us? The voice stirred the dormant embers of his yearning, for escape, for wandering, for losing himself in the vastness of the earth. Hadn't all the great prophets of God, despite their exalted status, migrated when their paths grew narrow? Let him be brave, just once in his life. Let him take a step, then another, then another. Yet deep down, he knew he lacked the courage. Perhaps his loyalty to places in an age of betrayal was stronger than his desire to leave. Or maybe that was just how he liked to convince himself. Since he had never been good at conversations, neither with strangers nor with those closest to him, he found refuge in silence. And when he longed to hear words from someone's lips, just the sound of a voice, as he did now, the wind would guide his feet to the doorstep of Hajja Hadda. Like a hedgehog waiting for the right moment, he stood before her door, then knocked with the rusty horseshoe that hung from its latch. The door never opened before verifying the visitor's identity through a small peephole, but for him, his voice alone was enough. Hajja Hadda was a kind-hearted woman of the old breed of courtesans, those who didn't just open their doors, but also mended the wounds of men battered by life, offering them solace through the art of listening, kindness, and companionship, rather than fleeting pleasures that only deepened their scars. No one called her Hajja except him, not because she had been on pilgrimage, but out of courtesy, as he preferred to grant every elder a measure of dignity. He had never quite understood the significance of that horseshoe on her door, nor the peephole that only opened from the inside. He would often ponder over what he had read about the history of prostitution, the sacred wealth-bringing trade of ancient Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Indian civilizations. What was it now but an evening tale in a marketplace circle? Who, by God, would envy an old woman in the twilight of her years, scraping by on a mere crust of bread earned through the bodies of passing women of the night. But Abderrahman was deeply grateful to Hajja Hadda, not because she procured young prostitutes for him. On one hand, he couldn't afford to pay for a pass. On the other, he was immune to the anxiety of virility or the castration complex, which he considered the downfall of the bourgeois elite. In fact, he didn't even like his own virility, much like the character Tengo in Haruki Murakami's 1Q84, because nature had chosen it for him without consulting him. He was grateful to her because, like a nurturing wet nurse, she never complained about his silence or his constant habit of carrying books under his arm. She was content with the pack of Marquis cigarettes he would give her in exchange for opening her home to him. In a traditional living room, where a massive lizard sprawled across the crumbling walls, they would share a cup or two of tea as she spoke, eyes brimming with tears about her youth, back when a prostitute had shan and marshan, status and prestige. He found something profound in her husky, smoke-worn voice, a philosophical weight laced with wisdom, especially when she would end her stories with an old Amazigh proverbs. He genuinely liked her, finding her thoughts similar to his mother's, pure and untouched by the labyrinths of books. He never judged how she earned her bread, for in his heart he believed all men, himself included, were the worst kind of prostitutes when put to the test. As he stepped out of her home into the dimly lit alley, he pulled his jacket tighter around him against the evening chill. The lingering scent of cigarettes and henna clung to his clothes like barnacles on the hull of an old boat. This evening, Hajja Hadda had not been her usual self. She had seemed burdened, like the rest of the world, and had merely smoked in silence, lighting her cigarette with a lighter pulled from between her breasts. Every now and then, when something on the television startled her, she would grimace so deeply that a single golden tooth flashed in her mouth. Abderrahman walked home, his mind suddenly gripped by an inexplicable wave of anger. He racked his thoughts, trying to trace its source. His memory latched on to something he had read the previous night, the tale of Potemkin village, where the cunning Russian minister Potemkin ordered the construction of grand, fake facades to conceal poverty from Empress Catherine the Great's eyes. He tried to shake off the thought when a passing woman, draped in a fragrant shawl of cloves, caught his eye. Her wide eyes seemed to smile at him. A dull ache throbbed in his thighs, and suddenly, as if waking from a dream, he realized the source of his unease. His father was home tonight. His father was a thorn between his teeth. How many times had he imagined himself wearing Vlad the Impaler's cap, flaying his father's skin, rubbing his body with salt, and letting goats lick him clean? How many times had he fantasized about slipping Socrates' poison down his throat? But he knew he was too much of a coward. True malice required a level of depravity he did not possess. Besides, he could barely take care of himself. It was enough to know with absolute certainty that the old man was one day, as he often told his mother, would be hanging from his own heel. As he reached the house, he tiptoed inside, careful not to wake the dead. He longed only to retreat to his room and lose himself in his imagination. Then, through a crack in the bathroom door, he saw his mother rubbing black soap onto his father's naked body, humming an Amazigh love song. Damn it! The air itself soured. A wave of nausea twisted his stomach. His mother had just lit a fire of rage in his heart. He stormed into his room, grabbed his pocket knife, and sharpened his pencils one by one, all while staring at the words of Engels on revolution. Just as he was about to stretch his legs over his desk, his father's voice bellowed from below, "Turn off the light," and Abderrahman smirked, whispering to his own reflection, "What revolution, you fool?" Abderrahman addressed his reflection in a small mirror on his desk, saying, "Didn't that damned Engels say, 'No revolution without revolutionary thought'?" He was about to prop his legs onto the desk when he heard discordant sounds seeping in from every wall of the room. He gathered his senses and strained to listen. Soon he could distinguish the alluring song of the mermaid, the terrifying scream of the ghoul, and, faint as a whisper in the ear, the tender ring of his mother's voice. From the depths of the room's floor, the coarse, resounding voice of Hajja Hadda rose, saying, "Shan and Martian in times long gone."